Welcome back, horror community. Since 2021, I've been working as a nurse in a psychiatric hospital. I always do night shifts. I'm not a doctor, so my job is more mechanical, you could say. Sort the meds into little cups, go from room to room, hand each patient their pills, make sure they swallow them, and then note in the logbook that the dose was given and taken. The rest of the time, it's just regular night duty. MedPass always went the same way. I'd walk into the room, call the patient's name, ask them to open their mouth to make sure they'd swallowed the pills, and then move on. In one of the rooms, when I held out the cup, the patient didn't take it. He looked straight at me and said calmly, almost trustingly, "I already got mine. You don't need to give it to me tonight." I ignored it. Patients say strange things all the time. It's part of the illness. So I handed him the cup and made sure he swallowed the pills. When I first started working here, they warned us right away. Don't argue. Patients can say whatever. Your job is simple. Don't get into a discussion. After finishing all the rooms, I went back to my office to make the necessary notes in the logbook. The logbook is organized in the simplest way possible. Patient's last name, a list of that night's meds, date and time they were given, and my signature. I pulled the logbook from the drawer, holding it in my hands, thinking, what a weird thing to say. I already got mine. How could he have gotten his night meds if I'd just started my shift? Some crazy talk, I figured. But when I opened the log, my signature was already there next to his name. I sat staring at it, trying to make sense of it. It showed I'd marked his dose before I'd even gone to his bed. I frowned and felt a surge of anger at myself, at the exhaustion, at this endless night schedule. But when I decided to check the med cart, my heart tightened. The compartment was empty. The dose was gone. According to the records, it had already been given. It turned out the medication had been handed out twice. Once, the one marked with my signature in the log, and the second time when I'd personally given him the pill. Not only was someone signing my name exactly like me, someone was handing out meds alongside me. But how could that even happen if I'm always the only one on nights? I set the logbook aside, forced myself to take a deep breath, and told myself it was just exhaustion. I poured some coffee and calmly finished my shift, trying to ignore the whole thing. The next night, back on my usual shift, I noticed something strange during my rounds near dawn. The patient's comments were starting to line up in a disturbing way. Two of them, from neighboring rooms, said almost the same thing, that I'd come to them twice that night. One swore he saw me leave a glass of water, then come back half an hour later with pills. Another said I'd stood by his bed for a long time, writing something in the logbook. But I knew for a fact I'd only entered their rooms once. I tried to shrug it off. In psych, everyone lives in their own world. Hallucinations and false memories are routine. But the way they said it was eerily precise. Not confused, rambling phrases, but confident descriptions. As if they'd actually seen something. For the first time that shift, I had this sick feeling like I didn't know something about my own actions. The thought flashed through my mind and stuck. What if they were seeing something hidden even from me? I forced myself to shake it off, but the unease kept growing. To stop myself from spiraling, I decided to check the security cameras and match the times in the logbook with the footage. I just wanted to see exactly what had happened, nothing more, and calm myself down. I grabbed the logbook with the dates and times marked, sat in front of the old monitor in the nurse's station, plugged in the flash drive with the night's footage, and hit play. The quality was lousy, but clear enough, The first minutes looked normal. Me walking down the hall, entering rooms, handing out meds. But then I reached the part with that patient, and the blood drained from my face. On the screen, I saw me. Same hair, same scrubs, same walk. Only the timestamp showed it happened an hour earlier than what I'd written in the log, and an hour before, I actually stood by his bed. I rewound. My heart pounded so hard it was louder than the fan. Again, the same hallway, the same figure, again me, but at the wrong time. My fingers went numb on the mouse. It was like a bucket of ice water had been dumped on me. If this wasn't a time glitch on the camera, then someone or something was acting in my place. Not a patient, not a coworker. Me, but not me. I took a deep breath and told myself I'd finish watching the footage to find a rational explanation. I regretted that instantly. I zoomed in, the old software stuttered. The picture went grainy, but the face was still clear enough. It was me. Scrubs, hair in a bun, med tray in hand. But the movements were wrong. Too slow, too stiff, like someone imitating familiar gestures without really knowing how they worked. I froze, staring. On the screen, the me but not me walked into the patient's room, handed over the cup, waited for him to swallow, then started to leave. And then the figure did something I knew I hadn't. It stopped dead in the doorway and lifted its head toward the camera. For a second, the screen felt alive. The stare was sharp, direct, like it knew I'd be watching that exact moment. My stomach dropped. It was my gaze, but not mine. Before I could look away, the me on the screen pulled the corners of its mouth upward and slowly smiled with black teeth. That smile had nothing to do with me. It looked alien, fake, like someone had stretched my face over a doll and made it move. The mouth stretched too wide, the eyes stayed empty. A feverish heat shot through me. I shoved myself back from the monitor so fast the chair screeched across the linoleum. My heart was pounding so hard I barely heard the drone of the ventilation. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed the logbook shut, stood up, and went to the patient's room. He was sitting on the bed, posture perfectly straight, hands neatly folded on his knees. His eyes, too clear, far too clear for his diagnosis, locked on mine. My mouth went dry. "Oh, nurse," he said softly, almost gently. "It's you again? But you know, I liked you better with the black teeth." I stumbled out of the room, my legs shaking so badly they barely held me up. For the rest of the shift, I kept away from his door, pretending everything was fine. In the morning, I re-watched the footage. The cameras showed only empty hallways and the real me entering the room once. It all looked as if that night had never happened at all. I've been working as a security guard in a psychiatric hospital for 3 years now. The job isn't hard, the pay is decent, and they even throw in some small benefits. Honestly, the hardest part is the silence, since I work the night shift. Once the patients get their evening dose of sleeping pills, they usually stay out cold until morning. The only ones awake are me and the night nurse. Sure, sometimes a patient might mumble or scream at night, but that's rare. Every hour I make my rounds, peeking through the little windows in the doors, checking each patient, especially the ones under close observation or in isolation. They also call me if they need help restraining a violent patient so they can give him a sedative. Mostly, though, I just patrol my wing. Like I said, easy job. But that night stuck with me forever. The first weird thing happened around 3 a.m. I was walking my usual route and came up to the room of a patient under strict observation. I knew he was strapped down with soft restraints. I'd personally helped tie him earlier that day because he'd been too aggressive. As I walked past his door, I heard footsteps inside, clear as day, like someone pacing back and forth. I froze and stepped back. First, I checked the hallway, turning my head left, then right. Empty. I looked through the window in the door. The patient was lying there quietly, eyes closed, straps tight. Exactly how he was supposed to be. I stood there in silence for a bit, straining my ears. No more footsteps. I shrugged it off and kept walking. The next night, it happened again. I was heading down the hall, and as I got close to that room, I heard the same footsteps, this time louder, heavier, and a faint whistling. The steps were steady, more confident than the night before. Like someone was pacing the floor, dragging their feet, whistling a tune. I stopped and peered in again. The patient was still strapped down, sleeping, looking peaceful. But the footsteps were real heavy, deliberate, unmistakable. Irritation crept in. I thought, great, I'm losing my mind. Soon I'll be joining them. And then came a dull thud, like something had fallen to the floor inside. "You've got to be kidding me. This isn't funny," I muttered. I pulled out my keys and decided to see what was really going on in there. I unlocked the door, turned on my flashlight, and stepped into the windowless room. Silence. No trace of footsteps. The patient was lying on the bed, straps snug, not a single one loosened. I checked them just to be safe. Everything was secure. Naturally, he didn't even stir. He was out cold from the heavy sedatives. I looked around the room, though I had no idea what I expected to find. Besides the bed, there was nothing, just a bare 10x10-foot cell. Everything looked normal. Bed, gray floor, blank walls. But then, on the floor under the bed, I noticed white markings. I crouched down, aimed my flashlight, and saw writing. It looked like someone had scrawled words in chalk. The letters were uneven and shaky, but readable. What the hell is this? Where would chalk even come from? I thought. We don't have it here. Stationery is locked away in the staff office, and the patient had been restrained the whole time. No chance he got hold of it. I touched the floor with my fingers. The white dust crumbled under my touch, clinging to my skin. Real chalk. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. I crouched there, staring at the letters, unable to believe they were real. Only 2 words were written. "He's here." The handwriting was messy, shaky, like it had been scrawled by an unsteady hand. I looked back at the patient. He was still lying there with his eyes closed, breathing evenly, straps tight. Just to be sure, I checked them again. Everything was secure. There was no way he could reach the floor, no way he could have written it. And chalk? He couldn't have gotten that in a million years. A cold wave ran through me. I didn't know what was worse. To admit someone had managed to sneak into the locked isolation room, or to believe the words had just appeared, or been written by a sleeping, restrained patient. I swept my flashlight under the bed and into the corners. Nothing. No one. That was the first time I truly felt fear. Nothing in training prepares you for that. I straightened up and glanced around the room again. I didn't even know why I was doing it for the 3rd time, but my brain was running on its own weird autopilot. I switched my flashlight from one hand to the other so I could wipe my sweaty palms on my pants. Logic kept telling me there was nothing here that could move or write. But my eyes were telling a different story. I was about to step out and lock the door when I heard a faint sound. The patient opened his eyes and stared straight at me. He looked at me like he was waiting for me to say something. Then his lips moved slightly and he whispered, "You heard the footsteps too?" That's when the bottom dropped out for me. I wanted to brush it off, but his voice was steady, not the usual nonsense or rambling. And he said exactly what I'd been hearing. I bolted out into the hall, slammed the door shut, and leaned my back against it. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. I tried to convince myself it was all a coincidence, forcing myself to breathe in slowly and exhale the same way, trying to calm down. Then I headed slowly back toward my post near the nurse's station, and then I heard it again, soft whistling and shuffling feet. But this time the sound was coming from the nurse's station. I ran toward her. "Was that you? Were you shuffling and whistling?" The nurse lifted her head from the desk and gave me a puzzled look. "No," she said. "I've been quietly sorting the meds for the morning. What's going on?" I told her about the footsteps, the whistling, and the chalk writing on the floor of that room. At first, she didn't believe me, but we went together to check the patient's room. Inside, the patient was still strapped to the bed. The floor was clean. Hope you enjoyed these true stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the next ones. And remember, the only ones who never fear are those without imagination.